The Russian economy, the 11th largest in the world, is right on the verge of collapse. With Vladimir Putin as the nation's leader, the war effort against Ukraine has been taking its toll on the economy. Not to mention the sanctions by Western powers against Russia that have halted trade and ruined bilateral relations. As of October 2022, budget revenue from non-oil sectors had dropped a whopping 20% from the same period in 2021, striking a heavy blow to the standard of living of the average Russian. This forced the government to raise taxes, cut spending, and turn to debt for revenue. How would the Russian economy recover from such a drastic nosedive? Will that happen with Putin at the helm of leadership? Join us as we discuss the critical point of the Russian economy. The Russian car market has already witnessed the harshest landing since March 2022. Leading automakers have departed Russia, and Western spare parts suppliers have mostly been prohibited or are abiding by the restrictions. This year's auto sales will decline by around 60% as only Russian and Chinese-made vehicles are available. The prolonged chip problem and restrictions on electronics imports significantly reduce the opportunities available to manufacturers, as Turkey and other nations try to avoid breaking US and EU sanctions. The delivery of components through other countries is a small trickle. Deliveries through Central Asian nations are sporadic due to the congested nature of these routes for other items in transit. The Russian economy is right at a dead end here. Then there's China, always kind enough to bail out a flailing economy. Or are they? Contrary to the expectations of Russian officials, Chinese automakers are not in a rush to construct assembly plants in Russia, and the Chinese government is buying out foreign shareholders' ownerships in such projects. The brand new manufacturing facilities will be built using Chinese technology. This would mean China is more interested in growing its influence in Russia than anything else that might be on the table. According to data from the Ministry of Economic Development of Russia, the GDP shrank by 5% in September of last year. The country is expected to see the deepest recession of any major economy this year and a decline in the gross domestic product of between 3% and 3.5%, according to the most recent predictions from the Central Bank of Russia. This was before the direct conflict with Ukraine. Although Ukraine's economy has suffered greater economic damage than Russia's, it has stronger supporters in the United States and its allies, who are giving billions of dollars in military and economic aid. But the Russian military did not even seem up to the task. According to Elliot Cohen, the chair of strategy at the Republican Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., corruption, poor management, and poor maintenance have caused a large chunk of the Russian arsenal that was pulled out of storage to deteriorate. While Russia is in a deep economic crisis, Moscow must reserve some of its arsenal of precision missiles, some of which are also used to carry nuclear warheads, to use them in the event of other occurrences, such as to deter NATO forces. As it did on November 15, when nearly 100 missiles were fired, Russia, under the leadership of Putin, continued its sporadic barrages of missiles to hit ground targets in Ukraine, now concentrating on electricity and heating infrastructure to drain the spirit of Ukrainian residents in the chills of a bleak winter. However, the frequency of these missile launches has drastically decreased from an average of 24 per day in the early months of the conflict. Only 15 caliber cruise missiles were fired in all of October, according to Yuri Inat, spokesman for Ukraine's Air Force headquarters, who made this statement last week. The importance of Russian weapons imports from Iran is a potential wild card. Another sign that the Russian military-industrial base is having trouble resupplying the country's soldiers is the fact that Moscow, one of the major makers of military hardware in the world, has been compelled to look to outside suppliers. According to the US, North Korea has started sending artillery projectiles to Russia. It's that bad. The campaign has so far been significantly impacted by 136 suicide drones, which started showing up on the battlefield in mid-September. Both sides have suffered significant military casualties. More than 100,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded, according to General Mark Milley, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs, and presumably a similar number of Ukrainian soldiers. Many of the military's more seasoned personnel, who are being replaced by less competent reservists, are likely to be among the many Russian casualties. As a result of the defeats on the battlefield, Vladimir Putin directed the Russian industry to increase military production. He established a new government coordination committee in October to aid in accelerating the production of these supplies, claiming that Russia needed to more quickly address problems related to supporting the military campaign and fend off Western sanctions. The desperate measures began with a call-up of 300,000 reservists by Putin, which began on September 21. As expected, this is starting to have an impact on the labor market. The mobilization caused tens of thousands of working-age males to leave the nation, aggravating a personnel crisis that developed shortly after the invasion on February 24. This affects the chain of supply because economic chains are disintegrating and valuable experts are leaving numerous industries. Even while the sanctions aren't completely effective, Western officials claim that they are preventing Russia from accessing microchips, and other cutting-edge technology would also prevent Russia from increasing the production of precision missiles. Rusi experts recently published a paper in which they believe that Russia could only produce 6 upgraded Iskander-9M723 ballistic missiles each month, based on an interview with a Ukrainian official. According to Western officials, the Russian industry is certainly experiencing severe constraints as it strives to enhance military production, and the sanctions from the Western powers play no small part in it all. The anti-dumping charges imposed on Russia to date have primarily targeted the metals and minerals, iron and steel, and chemical industries, which together account for a sizable portion of their non-energy exports to the United States. Let's quickly learn a thing or two about anti-dumping. The dumping margin is the degree to which the commodity is being sold below fair value. If the exporting nation has a market economy, prices there are used as a baseline to establish this. But if market forces aren't determining pricing in that exporting nation, commerce is allowed to utilize prices from another nation. Typically, both the dumping margin and the duty are relatively high as a result. The Commerce Department utilizes this information to determine the dumping margin. For example, if plastic bags sells for $10 in Russia, but Russian exporters sell or dump those widgets for $5 in the United States, commerce, though, could utilize prices from, say, Germany or France, where those widgets are offered for $20 if Russia were seen as a non-market country. Imports of Russian widgets into the United States would therefore be subject to a 400% duty rather than a 100% duty. That's how you rip someone off by the books. Congress swiftly enacted the measure to revoke Russia's most favored nation status not long after President Biden called for it in March. Under the rules of the World Trade Organization, imports from a country with MFN status must be treated the same as every other MFN country's goods, with an exception, of course, for the preferential treatment of free trade agreement partners. MFN is a key principle of world trading rules. That means cutting Russia off from MFN-made imports from Russia, subject to higher tariffs and trade barriers. But according to Putin, Russia has adapted effectively to the sanctions, and the West's attempt to destroy his nation's economy has failed. He stated last month that our economy has indeed grown far more adaptive and flexible. However, despite conflict and sanctions, the Russian economy has proven to be remarkably sturdy. In April and May, the majority of forecasts estimated that Russia's GDP would decline by 7 to 8% in 2022. While some forecasted a decline of 12 to 15%, prices were predicted to increase by 20 to 25%, while investments were predicted to decline by 25 to 28%, and retail trade by 8 to 9%. Russia's GDP increased by 4.7% in 2021, which was again another proof that a high base effect would cause a severe recession. But things went in an unprecedented direction. The significant fall in imports, restrictions on the export of foreign currency, and the necessity that exporters sell their foreign currency profits caused the ruble to appreciate sharply, while state help to banks and businesses allowed them to maintain investment levels. Because of the rapid expansion of the arms industry in 2022, the nation narrowly evaded a recession. A close to the Russian government's economic think group calculated that since the start of 2021, more weapons whose value has not been disclosed. The medium and long-term importance of sanctions against Russian exports rendered them useless in the near run, since the high energy prices kept the government's coffers full. In fact, from the last data collation in 2016, Russia was ranked 8th in the world for its proven oil reserves, which totaled 80 billion barrels, or 4.8% of the world's total proven oil reserves, which stood at 1.65 trillion barrels. There are proven reserves in Russia that are 60.4 times the country's yearly consumption. This indicates that there will only be roughly 60 years worth of oil left without net exports. We are making this estimate at current consumption levels, excluding unproven reserves. The European Union had failed severally to reach an agreement on the conditions of a price ceiling on Russian oil supplies. According to 3 diplomats, EU officials suggested the price cap could be reduced to $62 per barrel during talks on Monday. The European Commission, the EU's executive branch, proposed setting the price cap at $65 per barrel. Other nations, including the United States, have advocated for a higher cap, while Ukraine, Poland, and other nations have pushed for a lower price to further reduce Russia's revenue. To persuade Russia to continue selling oil under the cap, Biden administration officials have tried to base the price ceiling around Russia's past sales prices. The strained economy has led to growing discontent among the people of Russia. Will this lead to a regime change that will topple Putin's dictatorship? Only time will tell. Thank you for watching this video. You can check out our other videos that pop up on your screen. Bye for now.